Hey, so now let's continue this week's video with introducing you what are array and how they work. So array can be one-dimensional, two-dimensional, and so on. We usually work with one-dimensional and two-dimensional. Assume that you are acquiring data from your thermometer to measure a temperature of your system, and you want to measure the temperature over time, like dynamically. So you need to define an array with for example, the first column being the time and the second column being the temperature, and so on. So let's get started to the array and define you what are the arrays. So on the front panel, go to the array and matrix and clusters, and then choose an array. So here you are defining an empty array. Here the program doesn't know whether your array is a numeric, a string, or a boolean. So now you have to define what kind of array you are having. So you go again and right click and go, for example, to numeric and choose numeric control. Once you do that, you can put it inside your array. Now your array knows that this array is a numeric kind of array, and you can see how the color here changed to orange. You can get this and drag it down and have as many elements as you want, and this is like a one-dimensional array because it has only one dimension. It means one column but different rows. You can also do it the other way. You can do it this way. This is still a one-dimensional array. It means that it only has one rows and several columns. So a one-dimensional array means that only one row or one column and then different rows or columns. That's called a one-dimensional array. So let's do it vertically because it looks nicer. And then let's define another array. So go ahead, define another array, and this time again add a numeric control inside your array. So I'm going to stay here and then drag this down. So that means now I have a two-dimensional array, and now stay here and then drag it. And now that means that I have two-dimensional. I have an X and a Y. I have the rows and the columns. So array 1, the first array, I'm going to rename it. So we know that this is a 1D. And this one, I'm going to rename it as a 2D array. This is acting weird. Okay, a 2D array. So I have a one-dimensional and two-dimensional array. I'm going to go ahead and do different mathematics to it, and then you'll see what I mean by doing all these things. So let's go to the 1D array, and because this is a control, we defined a control, a numeric control in an array. We can change the numbers, and let's define some numbers to it, like 1, 2, 3, 4, like 5, 6, and so on. So I will have it up to here. And now, like you can see, if I change this here, I can go to different elements. So when you are working with array in LabView, the first element is always number 0. So I have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is a number of rows. So for example, if I make it small like this, so it's only showing like one element for me. Now I can change this and go to different rows in my array, and then you can see it means that I have number 5 row, or basically I have 6 elements, because the first row is always number 0. And then if you start increasing it, it will show you nothing because there is nothing there. So I will bring it back to 0 actually, and then I'm going to drag it down, so I will show you all of this. We can do the same thing for a two-dimensional array. I can define all these things, all these elements, 7, 8, and 9. Just assume like this. And now if so this is always the row, and here is always like column. So when you see here 0 and 0, it means from row 0 till whatever that is shown here, show me all the number. And it also says from column 0 till whatever that it has number, or it's opened here for me, show me what is inside the array. So for example, if I type row 1 and column 0, it means from row on till whatever, and from column 0 to whatever. So that's why here you don't see 1, 2, and 3, because that is row 0. You see it from 4, 5, 6. But because 0 is typed here, it means that from column 0 till the end. So it shows all the columns. So for example, here if I type 2, it means that column 0, 1, 2. So 1 and 2 basically should only show me 6 and 9 here, which it does, because it means that I don't even have to run it, because it's just so interactive with, in the front panel. So this is basically what it means. Like, this is the row number and this is the column number, and it doesn't mean show me row 1 and column 2 and only show you one element. It basically tells us what these things does is that it will say from row 1 till the end of the rows, and from column 2 till the end of the columns. So let's make it back. This is also true for the 1D array. Before, I have made it smaller so you can only see one element. But here, if I don't make it smaller and if I just type 1, it means from row 1, which is 2, till the end, and then you will see this. Or if I type 2, it means from 3 till the end, because that's row number 2. So this is also true for the 1D array. But if you want to get a specific elements out, then you can do some programming here in the front panel, in the block diagram, to get that. You can use the same set of like numeric functions, like adding the arrays, and do the same thing like you did before. So for example, let's add this two 1D array together. You cannot add a 1D array to a 2D array, like they have to be the same size. And not this one, say you cannot do that, it has to be the same size. But these two, like this one is this one, which you cannot add it to a 1D array. So you have to add like two 1D array. So I basically copy and paste the same 1D arrays so you can add them and then get the results here. Let me move it around here, and then you can run and get like 1 plus 1 is 2, 2 plus 2 is 4, and then find the result. So you can do the same thing. Let me delete this. Okay, so or you can use the mean, like the arithmetic mean of it. Say you want to find the average of this the 1D array. You want to see what is the average value of this array. So you right click in the block diagram, you go to mathematics, and in the mathematics you go to probability and stat, and there you can find the mean function here. And the mean function, it will ask you for the x value, and it will give you the mean value here by creating an indicator. This is also an error if you have any errors for finding it. So like now the mean value of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, if you run it, it's going to give us 3.5. So this is how like you can play with array exactly like you work with like just one number, like one numeric number. There are some functions. I'm going to delete this and keep these two arrays because they will be useful. There are some functions if you go to the block diagram for array. So for now, so far I just showed you how to make an array with different types in the front panel. I actually showed you how to make an array with the numeric type in some previous videos. When we were trying to change a decimal number to a binary number, I showed you how to make an array with Boolean, if you remember, so that the lights were on and off. So you can make array with different types. For now, we are working with numeric, and mostly you work with numeric because we are engineers. So This is the front panel, but on the block diagram, if you right click and go to the array, there are a lot of like different already built-in functions that are built just specifically to work with array, and it's going to be really useful. Like if you want to find this array size, or find a specific element of an array, replace some elements in an array, or build an array, or there are so many different types. In this video, I'm going to show you several of these, and how you can use each one of these functions, and they will be really useful. In the next video, we are going to solve a problem, a program using array. So basically really use them. So let's choose array size now here. And for the 1D array, if you connect the 1D array to this array size, you can get an indicator that will show you the size of this array. So this is for a 1D, and you can do the same thing for a 2D. Like if you go to array and choose the array size, I will connect these two and then create an indicator for the size of the second array size. I want to show you two things here. Actually, one thing here. So just notice the wires in here and in there. Like, let me make it. Yeah, the orange line here, it's thicker than just a control element. So for example, let me choose a numeric control here, and then say you want to, it's not an array, but say you want to add it to a constant number. And the constant number here, for example, is 1. So notice these 3 wires. Like, let me put it up. Notice these 3 wires. Like, this is like maybe a 1 PT line. This is maybe like a 2 PT line, and this is like double lines. So when you see a line with this thickness, that means that you are working with a scalar, with just one number, one string, or one boolean. It means that it's not an array, it's just one element, just one thing. So you can see here in the numeric, you don't see any 0 behind, like for the array, to show you the dimension of it, because this is just one thing, it's just a one single number. So that's why the wire here is not thick. But when you go from like a numeric to a 1D array, this line, these wires get thicker, maybe twice thick. And that shows that you're working with a 1D array. But when you go from 1D array to 2D array, it's going to be a double line, a double single line here like this. So that this double line, whenever you see a double line, that means that you're working with a 2D array. This line can be orange, meaning that it's a floating point number. It can be a pink, meaning that it's a string, or it can be green, meaning that it's a boolean. But the thickness of it won't change from one type to another, boolean, numeric, or string. The thickness of them are the same, just the colors of them change. When you see a thick line, it's a 1D array. When you see a double line like this, that means it's a 2D array. And when you see like a normal thin line, that means that's just a numeric number or a string, just one thing. And notice here for the size, like the size for the 1D array is again one line, which is not really thick like these lines. That means that it's only gonna be one item, one element. But here for the size 2, the thickness of it is similar to this. And that means that this is it's gonna be like a 1D size array. So that's why here we have to drag this down. So that means that we are having like a 1D array of lines. So let's run it. Actually, we don't need this part anymore. I just want to show you like how thin or thick the wires are. So now let's run it. And you can see the size of the 1D array is 6. It means that it has 6 elements. Although the maximum number here is 5, because the row number always starts from 0. But the number of the elements, or the size of this matrix, this array, is 6. On the other hand, the size of this 2D array is 3 by 3. So that means 3 rows and 3 columns. Let's say that I add another row here and see how this is gonna change. So it means that this is 4 rows and 3 columns. So the first thing that you see is the number of rows, and the second thing is the number of columns. So this is the array size, and it's really useful when you are programming. During your program, you need to know the size of your array and you need to change things about it. Now let's delete this one, which is the array size, and then go to the next function. So right click again and go to array, and this time choose index array. So index array, if we go to the help, returns the element or sub-array of n-dimensional array at index. So depending what you type here for the index, it will give you the element or the sub-array of it. So let's go here and wire this 1D to here, and say we want to get element number, the 4th element, or row number 3, which is 4. So you can right click in the index and then create a constant, and here you can type 3. You should not type 4. Why? Because this is row number 3, because we start from 0, so don't confuse that. And then create an indicator. Let's do the same thing for the 2D array and say we want to get 7. No, not 7, just we want to get 7. Yeah, say we want to get 7. And then say array, index array. And then it asks for the row and for the column. So I will say create a constant. The row number is 2. And the column number, which is a constant of 0. And then again, create an indicator. This is this, and this is for this. And now let's run it. See, we get the 4 and the 7 out. In the index array function, if you click and use this like blue square and drag it down, you can define as many elements as you want. So for example, so far we have defined these elements. What if you want to define like number 5 here? You can drag it down, have 2 more rows and row and columns, and say create a constant for each of them. So for row it will be number 1, and for column it will be number 1, 2. And then this will create another element for you, another indicator which we can define for it, and it's gonna be this here. So this element number 3 now is gonna be 5. So let's run it, and you can see like this is 5. So with index array, you can click on it and you can drag this down to as many as you want, and just define different elements that you want to use for your future programming. You can do that, like you can mostly do this like dragging down for most of the functions. Like here for 1D function, it will be the same thing. Like if I drag this down and then create another constant, and this time I define it like for 5. It's going to be the last element for us, and then create an indicator for it again. Now if I run it, it's going to give me the 6. So basically most of the array function, you can always drag them down and add more based on your need. So that was an index array, to get an element out from your array. So let's say that here, instead of like getting an element of 7 and 5, you want to get this sub array out, like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 out of your array, and you want to keep that for your future programming in your program. So how we can do that? If you right click again and go to the array, there is another function. So far I showed you the array size, the index array, but there is another function which is called array subset. So click on that. So the array subset asks for the array first. The array can be a 1D array, a 2D array, and it will ask for the index and for the length. So basically the index and the length, the first set is going to be for the row, and if I get it and then drag it down, the next set is going to be for the column. So let's get the 2D array as the array here. And because this is a 2D array, once it is connected to the function itself will drag down and will produce like two indexes, the first for the row and the second for the column, because it knows that this is a 2D array. And then say we want to get 7, 8, 9, and 10, 11, 12 out. So 7 is actually row number 2 and all the columns. So for the first index, you create a constant of 2. It means from row number 2, it will ask for the length of this subarray, and the length is 2 again because we need 7 this row and the row of 10. So it's going to be 2. The next index we create a constant for is for the column, and that means I'm going to start with column number 0. So I'll just use the default one, and then for the second one, which is the length of the column, I will create a constant. I'm going to choose 3 because I'm going to go with all the 3 columns. So basically what I've created, I want to see 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 as a second, it basically as a subarray of this 2D array. And now that you have filled all this part, you can create an indicator for the subarray, and again you can see your subarray is again two-dimensional because it is two-dimensional. And again, when you created it, even in the front panel, you can see it's two-dimensional because there are like 2 zeros here. So that's why I have to stay here and then make it larger so I can see all the rows and columns. And now if I run this, you'll see that we have created this subarray of 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So let's continue with the array functions. I think it's better that I delete some of these things here so we'll have a cleaner space. Okay, we have a 1D array and a 2D array. So let's say that we want to build an array. So basically for your project, for your research, for example, you are measuring several things at a time. So for example, you have a time elapsed. Starting next week, we're going to talk about time loops. So you will have like time that is changing, and then you at different times you are reading, for example, a temperature or a pH or a specific voltage or a pressure or something with your instrument, and you want to make a big array that, for example, the first column of your array is the time and the other columns are temperature, pH, pressure, voltage, or whatever that you are measuring with your system. So at the end you will create that big array of the data, and you want to, for example, save it into an Excel file and then later email it to yourself. So you'll have the final results. So how can we build an array? So if you right click on the block diagram and go to array again, there is a function called build array. So you choose this function. So depending on what kind of array, a 1D or 2D array that you want to build, this will work. So it doesn't matter. So assume I'm going to make another one of this array here, a 1D array. Like before, and say that we want to add these two arrays together and create a 2D array out of these two 1D arrays. So first thing that we have to do is we have to drag this one row down because we're going to add two arrays to it. This build array function by itself, it's only like 1. But if you drag it down, you can drag it down as much as you want and start adding more and more array. But for now, we are just going to have 2. For example, one of them is time, and for example, the other one is temperature. So you start connecting these two arrays to these two nodes here. So what do you think the output of this array will be? It's going to be a 2D array, correct? So the wires will be 2 lines. So let's create an indicator for it and confirm this hypothesis. Yeah. So this is confirmed. We're going to produce a 2D array out of two 1D array that they are build together. So we are building the 2D array. And because we know this is a 2D array, because we see these two like zeros here, we're gonna drag this and make it larger. Let's run this and see what you'll see. So after we run it, you see that apparently this is adding these two like vertically looking 1D array into like horizontally oriented array. So if I drag it one more icon down, you can see like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are oriented horizontally rather vertically. So this might be okay for you, but usually I like to see them like vertically. So how can we do that? If you right click and go to array, there is another function here which is called transpose 2D array. So if you choose that here and just delete this part and then bring this up and get the result, which is gonna look like horizontally, and transpose it and create it vertically. So now let's run it. Now you will see that this is now vertically oriented. So, so basically with this example, I showed you two things: how to build an array and how to transpose and switch it. So that was for a 1D array. I'm gonna delete this part to have a cleaner space. And this time we're gonna build two 2D arrays. So that's why I'm gonna copy and paste this one here. So I basically have like two of these 2D arrays and say that I wanna put these two together. Again, you right click, go to array and build array. Again, we have to scroll it one row down because we are having two arrays that we're gonna put them together. The first one is a 2D, the second one is a 2D. And if I put them together, let's see, it is still an array, but you can see like it is different looking. It has like 3 zeros, so it basically is a 3D array. So let's see what it means and how it looks like. So now let's run them together. You can see I only see like the same thing here, but if I go to 1, I want to show you something interesting. So if I change this, so this is 0, that means that I have this 2D array, and then you have another 2D array on the back of it. So so basically this is rows and this is your columns, and this is the other dimension which is on the back. So if I go from 0 to 1, you'll see the same thing. But if I go to 2, you'll see nothing. And here, this is the rows. So if I go to 1, I'm just going 1 rows up, basically. And if I go with this one, if I play with the third 0, I go with different columns. I basically look at different columns. I will change this array number 2 to different numbers so that you can really see what I mean. It will be easier to follow. So I'm just gonna multiply every element by 2. So I'll have a different set of arrays instead of like repeating the same array. And now I'm gonna run it one more time. So so if you stay at 0, 0, 0, and basically this 2, 0 means like all the rows and columns, and this 0 means the first layer of your 2D array. You'll see the first layer is going to be the first thing that you connected here, which is this one. And then if you scroll 1 up and go to 1, you'll see the second array. So basically this is a 3-dimensional array, and you can see the lines here are still 2 lines, but they are further apart from each other. So when you add two 2D arrays together as like building an array, there is no other dimension. You cannot make a 4-dimensional array. You can only have a 2-dimensional array to look at the data. But that array can be like a 3D or a 4D and so on by having like different layers. So this is basically a 3D array which has layers. Like the other dimension is in layer. The first dimension is either row or column, which is a 1D array. The second dimension is going to be row and column together. And the third dimension is going to be the second layer on the back. So basically what we did is that we added 2 layers to each other. You can define another array here, and maybe I can change this to different numbers, and then you'll see what I mean here. So now if I scroll this even one more row down and then connect these two, I'm still gonna have a 3D layer, a 3D array, because it's still 2D arrays that are adding to each other. But instead of having like 2 layers, I will have 3 layers. Let me bring this down and move them so it's a little bit cleaner for you to see. So now I'm having these 3 2D arrays that I'm going to build them all together and basically append the array together by using the build array function. And after you run this, again, the first layer is going to be this. The second layer, which is going to be layer number 1, is going to be this array. And then the third layer, which is going to be the array number 3, is going to be this layer. So just want to show you the build array works for 1D array, 2D array, and just depending when you add arrays to each other, you're gonna increase the dimension of it 1 level up. So when you go with the 1D array and then build a 1D array together, you're gonna come up with a 2D array. But when you go with 2D arrays, you're gonna come up with 3D arrays. So depending on the application, you might want to go with 3D arrays or not. I personally don't go. I like to really see the arrays and data. Just it's visually easier for me and easier for the users to follow. But for some application, it might be really useful. So depending on the application and what application you have for your project, you might want to use this. So that was the introduction part to arrays, and there are a lot of different more functions that you can use. So I'm not going to go one by one to them. But I thought that it's really interesting and it will be helpful actually and interesting for sure to show you how this function works, and depending on the application that you have, you can choose any of them and play with them and use them. There's also a matrix functions here, and matrix are always like 2 dimensions, and it's basically really similar to arrays. So you can go with matrices or arrays depending what you want. And array, usually they have more functionality than matrices. But if you want to transpose a matrix, for example, it's just something that the function is already there. So I hope this video was useful for you and it's going to be helpful. So next video, I'm going to basically solve a problem that use arrays and different array functions. So you can look at the array and the functions into one big problem. And then we're gonna be finished with this week's video. So thank you, till next video, see ya.